Alright, so today we're going to learn about earthquakes.
Okay.
As it's called in the Mishnah, as it's called in the Gemara, it's ha-zivaos. Right? So we have that word. We have to figure out what is that word. And then we're going to take an interesting journey today. So first we're going to start in environmental science. We're going to learn about a little geology.
Right.
And we're going to see the scientific theory. Now I'm doing this for a reason. I'm not always going to bring in scientific theory so much, but I think it's going to be important because what we're going to do further is then we're going to compare the Talmud Bavli with the Talmud Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, and the Babylonian Talmud. And then we're going to really deeply analyze what is going on in everyone's description of an earthquake. And we're going to look very carefully, even when we get to the Gemara, that we're going to see different people are going to give their theories or their svara on what an earthquake is. And we want to compare two categories. We want to know, is the person in the Gemara, even though we're getting the information in the Gemara, is it just a svara? Is it just a theory, scientific, like knowledge? Is it just their own logical reasoning? And then there's the deeper spiritual meanings of like why Hashem's sending earthquakes. So we understand, so there's two categories. Is it svara? Or is it Torah? Or is it like Al Pi Hashem? Is it the Divrei Hashem? Is it something that Hashem specifically told to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, on Har Sinai, that Hashem said specifically, this is how an earthquake works? Is it a pasuk in the Torah? So we have all kinds of pasukim and Tehillim, and we have Perek Shira, we have a Sefer Iyov, that it talks a lot about the natural phenomena of the world, and how Hashem created the world, and then how Hashem's running the world, and all of the phenomena we see in the world. So we want to know specifically, is it all just theories? Or is it are we told Torah? We want to get to the bottom of what an earthquake is. And then we want to see how do we evaluate a theory? How do we know if a theory, so what the scientific method is. Like someone will come up with a hypothesis, they'll analyze the world, they'll look around, they'll see something, they'll ask a question, like for instance, like we say, like, why is there an earthquake? What causes an earthquake? What's the cause of it? So we can come up with a hypothesis. Then what the scientists will do is they're going to gather experimental data, and then they're going to see if the data, if it validates their hypothesis or it invalidates their hypothesis, and they may have to refine it or change it or throw out a theory. But theories can change. Scientific knowledge changes with the ages, and it's revised. But if we are receiving it directly from Hashem, if it's Torah, then we're receiving it from the Creator, of the universe. Hashem's brings the earthquakes on for a certain reason. We'll see different reasons why He may bring an earthquake, and then amazingly enough, we make a bracha on the earthquake. So we're going to eventually get back to that. All right, so this, I don't know if this fully illustrates, but if you think about how big the earth is, it's a massive sphere. It's a massive sphere. And believe it or not, like I didn't have my conversion here from kilometers to miles. It doesn't register as much to me. The textbook had it in kilometers, which doesn't always resonate as much as miles. But I think it's like we're talking about thousands of miles to the core, to the very center of the earth. And what's amazing is people, like the deepest minds, I forgot to bring the exact figure, but the deepest minds, the most that human beings have like gone into this, what we call the geosphere, is so tiny. I think only, like maybe even like, I want to say that's no more than a few miles down into even the crust layer. So we live on the crust, okay? And this is where all the continents are. This is where the oceans are. So everything's on the crust. We live on the very outermost area, Now, I don't want to get too into it. The Zohar says something incredible, which I don't fully understand. But the Zohar maybe implies there's a thing called the hollow earth theory, that there's possibly like Rakiyas and there's divisions and there's possibly people living like in this hollow earth. I don't want to get too much into that, but it could be even more miraculous. The earth could be even more miraculous than we understand right now. But my point is that human beings have actually explored very, very little of the massive interior of the earth. Like even if you think about
70 kilometers most, you said, right?
Yeah, I think just a handful of miles is all the deepest minds go. Like, so we've only seen, a couple miles in to the crust. Now, we live on the crust, the crust goes, I think they're estimating 5 to 70 kilometers. Now, if no one's actually seen the interior, how do they know? How are they coming up with this hypothesis? How are they coming up with this theory? So what the scientists, or what they're using, is they're using sound waves. And they're taking sound waves and they're sending the sound waves down. And then the way the sound waves react differently if it hits a liquid, if it hits a solid. And we can see, for instance, something like an ultrasound. Like, you can take sound waves and they can go into the mother's stomach, and we can actually take the sound waves back out and change that into an image. And we can actually get an image of the baby, like inside the mother, through sound waves. So there is a great benefit to sound waves and imaging. But how accurate this all is, we're not totally sure. But their theory is going on the fact that we know there's some kind of geothermal activity in certain parts of the earth, because we know we have hot springs, and people can even harness some of that geothermal energy. There's heat that can come up. Like in Yellowstone Park, there's amazing natural hot springs, and Hashem's created areas where there's very hot areas of the earth, and so they do feel pretty confident there's heat and greater heat as you go deeper and deeper into the earth. So their theory is, like, as you come to the core, it's like all the elements are in almost like a plasma state, like a molten state. Okay, so lava is when it comes out, and it's called magma, when it's in the earth. But it's like superheated rock that's heated to like a liquid state, or possibly even a plasma state. A plasma state is like kind of the energy level of a sun. But they do believe, they believe it's hottest at the core. But you can see it's tremendous. We only live on this very thin crust, so it's 5 to 70 kilometers, they're estimating. Then the next layer is the lithosphere, and this is 15 to 300 kilometers, thick. Now, so we live here on the crust, all the continents are on the crust, all the oceans are on the crust. So in this layer, the lithosphere, what they think is happening is they think this area is divided into what's called the tectonic plates. Right, so the famous tectonic plates we hear about all the time with earthquakes. Let me see if I can get you a quick picture here. And they believe that layer is divided into tectonic plates. Let me see if I can find my handy dandy map. I don't know if I got the right page number. I don't want to spend so much time on this because we have a lot to do in the Gemara. But they believe that layers are divided into these plates, and then these plates crash again. They can't crash against each other, and we'll see. And that's what's going to cause that's the scientific theory of the earthquakes. So then we have this next layer of the asthenosphere, and they believe this is like 250 kilometers thick. So you're seeing it's tremendous size of the interior of the earth. But they believe what's happening in this layer, it's mantle rock, has kind of melted into a liquid state, and it's kind of flowing slowly. So these massive tectonic plates are kind of floating on that next layer, and then as we go deeper and deeper, they see it's very thick, 2,550 kilometers thick, the mesosphere, and then we go into the outer core, inner core. So this is the mantle, this is the core, and this is 2,200 kilometers, the outer core, another 1,000. So we see it's incredibly, it's huge. It's a huge sphere. And we've really explored so little of the geosphere. Just to go to the bottom of the ocean is a tremendous thing. Yeah.
Do you use sound waves to get down there?
So they're coming up with theories. Temperature readings. I don't know exactly. They haven't seen it. For sure we've explored so little of this. I mean, consider the fact that just the bottom of the ocean, the Mariana Trench, the deepest part of the ocean, is just in the crust. That's not even the next layer down. So it's all theoretical. It's as far as I understand,
it's theoretical. It's not practical.
Because no one's actually seen.
But what about through sound waves?
So how the sound waves are bouncing back. That's the data they're taking, and then they're coming up with their theories. So that's how they're they go. This is solid. This is broken up into the tectonic plates. This is. Then it's like this floating on a mantle, and then they think it's hotter and hotter and hotter as you go down. So that's their theory. And then on this level of the lithosphere, where it's divided up into tectonic plates, so then they think when the plates crash into each other, that's when you get the earthquakes. That's their theory of the earthquake. Here, let me just see if I can look up tectonic plates real quick. I thought I had the page number, but I'll show you this. And then you'll see that where the tectonic plates are, it's also called the ring of fire. That's where we have a lot of earthquakes. But where these plates are is where generally the earthquakes and the volcanoes take place. I don't know. I don't have the map right now. It's going to be. I want to get to the other things, but that's their theory. So we have to say, okay, so they have some data through the sound waves, but we have to say that through experimental, like information, like right, we really don't know. I mean, this is all theory. It's all theoretical. And for instance, like some years ago here, I think it was around 2012. I forgot the exact year. We had an earthquake in Washington D.C. Well, places like California, Israel, they're right on the fault lines of the tectonic plates where they come together. But Washington, D.C. is not. That's not on a fault line. So it's interesting because we can have earthquakes in other places. So either Hashem has more tectonic plates than they think, maybe it's divided up into more, or the true reality is also that the earthquake's coming from Hashem. And Hashem, and whatever mechanism Hashem wants to use to make the earthquake happen. So even an area that's not on a tectonic plate, that not a fault line, that doesn't get a lot of earthquakes, Hashem can make an earthquake there. Right, so this is the modern scientific theory. But now we want to go into the Gemara. But we want to keep in mind, we want to keep analyzing in each idea we get about the earthquake in the Gemara. We want to really try to see, are they getting it from a pasuk in the Torah? Are they getting it from a Masorah, from Moshe, from Hashem? Or is it just a theory? Is it just a svara? And we want to try to keep that in mind today as we go through this. Okay, I'm going to take a picture of this real quick. I'm going to erase it, and then we'll start our journey. I think we'll start in the Bavli, and then we'll go into the Yerushalmi. Let me just...
How cold would it be?
Okay, so let's erase this, and then we'll start going into the Gemara.
Well, we'll find out at 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock we'll find out. It's about 2,000 kilometers per mile approximately.
So let's see. So like a
I just pulled it up.
like a 5K race is I think about like 3.2, 3.3 miles. So it's what is it? So what's the conversion?
About 2,000 kilometers per mile.
Okay.
Approximately.
Okay. Right. So it's still thousands and thousands of miles. It's just a vast. Tremendous.
Number of
I mean, if you
miles.
think about how big the Earth is, and then the whole interior of that sphere, but it's really fascinating. I mean, there's a fascinating. I believe it's in Parsha Vayikra in the Zohar, and it seems to imply that there's different possible rakiyas inside the Earth.
Right.
So there could be like skies and land, and I forgot the rabbi's name, but he thought it was silly when he heard it from his Rebbe, that the earth could possibly have life all throughout it inside.
Right.
And then it says something miraculous happened to him. It said he was on a ship, and the ship, got capsized. And Hashem did a nace for him. He was miraculously brought down to the bottom of the ocean. And then it's unclear. I don't know if maybe he went into like some opening in the bottom of the ocean. But anyway, he saw a world like way below us, and he saw creatures in there, and they were davening to Hashem. They were speaking a language he never heard before. Right? So then Hashem also let him miraculously come back to earth, and then he apologized to his Rebbe, and he told him he would never doubt. So no matter how miraculous like the teaching is in the Torah, we don't understand. I mean, it's like I think after Mashiach comes, we're going to see the world's far more miraculous. Look, there's a Leviathan. There's some giant sea dragon or massive sea creature living somewhere in the bottom of the sea. There's the behemoth. There's some massive like ox creature, and it could be he's just sleeping and there's like a mountain over it. There's wonders in the world that we don't even understand yet, and don't fully comprehend. But even with thousands of years of mankind exploring the earth and doing scientific research on the earth, it's amazing. They're still finding new species of animals. For thousands of years, they haven't even found yet. There's still all these wonders to be found. It's just so the earth is packed with life and just incredible. So we're going to start here. So we're going to start in the Talmud Bavli, and we'll just kind of go through the Gemara. We'll try to analyze a little bit of what's going on here. And this is on Bracha. So this is on our Mishnah on Brachos 54a.
54 or 59?
Well, 54a is the Mishnah,
Yeah.
but the actual Gemara right that we're going to look at today is on 59a, and it's earthquake. So the first thing is Rav Katina, right? Rav Katina, he's going to say this. He says this. He says this word Zivaos, right? Because it's a word we're not so familiar with, that the Mishnah uses this term of Zivaos. But what is it? He says it is and mit is maybe another word that we're not so familiar with, right? It's a goha, but it means earthquake, right? So he's saying it means an earthquake. So we can make a bracha. The Mishnah says that we can make a bracha on earthquake. We can make a shakot, Baruch ta Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam. And these are right on your sheets. I don't know if you guys don't. You can. I made the sheets so you can take the notes if you want for sure. But I made the sheets for you so you have all the information. It's up to you, whatever you want to do. But I thought it'd be easier because we're not going to write everything. But he's saying it's an earthquake, and we can make a shikoko, that his power, his strength, gavuraso, his strength, maleolam, fills the word. So we can make, so it's an earthquake, and the bracha we're making on the earthquake, an earthquake showing the power and the strength of Hashem, and it fills the whole world with like a yira of Hashem, like a fear, a respect for how powerful Hashem is, and we should follow His word. And we're going to see like why is Hashem bringing these? What's the purpose of these earthquakes? So then, this is going to be very strange. So we're going to see two very different conversations, right? We're going to see two very different conversations from the Bavli and to the Yerushalmi. Now, where is Rav Katina going to go to get information? He's going to go, it's very strange. He's going to go, Rav Katina, he's going to go to the house, and this is not a person. So in today's world, where would we go if we wanted information about earthquakes? We may talk to a geologist. We may talk to an environmental scientist. We may talk to someone that researches earthquakes. They take seismic readings. They study earthquakes. But he goes to the last person we would think, but he goes to a bone necromancer. So he goes to a necromancer, someone who does kishuv magic through dead bones and all kinds of creepy stuff like that. And he's going to ask him. He's going to ask him information about the earthquake. So it says Rav Katina was walking along the road when he reached the door of the house of a bone necromancer. So it says Ganach Goha. So then he reaches the door, or actually, I'm sorry, he wasn't going specifically there, but he reaches the door. Let me just make this clear. So he's walking, and then he happens to be in front of the door of this guy, of the bone necromancer. Right? So I don't think he was going specifically to visit, but he knew that there was a necromancer there. So then the Gemara says, all I know is this. It says there was a ganach, a ganach goha. So it says, so then there was an earthquake. So it says, while he was walking, the earth shuddered and quaked. Right? That's what it means. So ganach goha means the earth is shuddering. It shuddered and quaked, meaning he experienced an earthquake. And he's right in front of this necromancer's house. So then, it's interesting. So Rav Katina says, while I'm here, let me see if this necromancer understands what an earthquake is. Because he was interested. Like Hashem made an earthquake, and he's in front of this man's house. So he's like, let me see if, this sorcerer, let me see if he has any knowledge. So he asked him, he says, do you know And then the necromancer says to him, he says, I'm wondering if this man knows how the earthquake, happened. So then the necromancer, he shouts out to him, and he says, Katina, Katina, should I not know? And this is the answer he gives. So this is the necromancer's reason. Okay, so for sure, what are we saying here about the necromancer, right? It's definitely his svara, right? The necromancer didn't receive it from Hashem. So this is his theory. This is going to be the necromancer's theory of earthquakes, right? So we're going to see what his theory is. But it's interesting because he's going to look into a more spiritual, reason. So this is going to be theory on earthquakes. Okay, and his theory is this. He's going to say this. He's going to say, Katina, Katina, why should I not know? He says, when Akadosh Baruch Hu, when the Holy One, blesses He, remembers His children who endure in misery amongst the nations of the world, He sheds 2 tears into the great sea, into the Mediterranean Sea, and its sound is heard from one end of the earth until its other end, and that is an earthquake. Okay, so here's the theory. So the theory is, Akadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, Hashem, right? Hashem remembers the Jewish people, remembers His children, remembers His children in exile among the nations. Okay? And then, it's interesting, then Hashem is sad, Kiviyako, and Hashem sheds 2 tears, 2 tears into the Great Sea. Alright, so this is the theory. This is the svara of why there's earthquakes. So then something with a sound, the sound from those tears. So the sound from the tears, the sound is heard from one end of the world to the other. One end of world to the other. Okay, I really need more board space here because we want to really break this down. But we'll start breaking it down and then we'll see what we're going to write. Okay. Alright, so then let's see what the reaction is. So now we're going to evaluate the theory. Okay, so it's hard in a sense, like a scientist is not going to appreciate this theory at all. Because the theory is very spiritual in nature, for one thing. So the only physical effect that we see, according to the necromancer, is that these great tears, or some great volume of water, is coming into the Mediterranean Sea, and that's causing sound. So it's something about sound waves and tears, so deposits of water. It could be like if we get, if we want to think about it in the very physical terms, like Hashem could send like a great rain, like a great storm, 2 great storms. Okay, but it's not very rooted in the physical, but we're going to see how they're going to break it down. But it's definitely it's a theory, it's svara, it's not something he received from Hashem, through the Masorah of the Torah. Okay. It's interesting. It's giving us a spiritual reason. It's giving a spiritual reason that when there's an earthquake, then Hashem is really sending us a message that he's sad that we're in the exile, and every time Hashem thinks about us being in the gullus, like he makes the earth shake. And in a sense, if we can think about it, like it's not the natural state of how everything should be. We shouldn't really be in gullus. We should be in a geula where we're living with Hashem. So everything's not perfect. So the earth shaking. Okay, so we're going to start to see how they're going to break down this theory. So then, Rav Katina, he's not going to accept it. He's going to say this. He's going to say the bow necromancer is a fraud and his words are false. He says, if it's true, if your theory is true, and that's interesting. So Rav Katina's answer is this. Rav Katina says, he's gonna say no, because I'm not buying it. So Rav Katina's answer is, if true, there would be 2 earthquakes. So it's interesting. So he's taking the logic of the necromancer and he's starting to break down the logic. He's saying, no, I don't like your theory. Because, okay, let's say they're like Hashem's sending these tears. Whatever a tear of Hashem is, but let's say in the physical world it's going to manifest as some massive thing of water. So we can envision it maybe a big storm. But there's 2, according to the necromancer's theory, there's 2 of these drops, 2 of these teardrops from Hashem, and they're coming into the Mediterranean Sea. And Rav Katina is like, I don't like it. I don't like your theory, because if there's these 2 massive things of water coming down, and the sound from that is somehow causing a earthquake, there should be 2 earthquakes. Your theory doesn't make sense. So he's arguing against the logic of the theory. But then it's going to be interesting. So, however, the Gemara is going to say something interesting. The Gemara doesn't quite love Rav Katina's logical, attack on the theory, because it says, however, it was not as Rav Katina argued. There were 2 earthquakes, and the reason that Rav Katina did not admit to him was so that the whole world should not make the mistake of following the necromancer. So the Gemara adds like an editorial here, and the Gemara says, theory could be true, right? It could be true. I think it says there was 2 earthquakes. There was 2 earthquakes, right? But didn't want to credit, he didn't want to credit the necromancer. That's not a, maybe a geologist we can publicize their theory a little more, but a guy that's doing dark magic with bones, that's not our expert witness. We're not looking to publicize, even if it was true, the theory of the necromancer. So then we got to see why does the Gemara think it could be true? Why could this theory about earthquakes be true? Does everybody have any questions up to where we are so far, or the whole thing's mind-boggling?
This is Zohar stuff.
It's crazy, right? It's deep spiritual.
Crazy. Yeah, from a rational, practical point of view,
right?
We don't get.
Right, the plates. The plate sounds good, right? The plate sounds good. There's big plates. All the continents, the oceans are on these big plates. The plates bang against each other. Everything starts to shake. It sounds logical, right? It's got a nice logic to it. But once again, we're trying to get to the MS. So I don't know. Maybe it sounds good. Tectonic plates sounds good. They're floating on this, this layer of like molten rock. So they're drifting. They bang against each other. But we do have earthquakes where they don't bang against each other. So how can we, what's the logic there?
I mean, when you bring up a point where this Earth is so humongously big, right?
Yeah.
In San Francisco, I've gone through a gazillion earthquakes, right? So the question is, how can you even come up with a theory of how this massive tectonic plates are bumping into each other and creating 8.4 earthquakes?
Yeah, right. And why are some, if it's just the bumps, why are some bumps? But here's what I want to get to too. Let's give the geologists, let's give them credit right now. Let's say they're totally right. Let's say, they got it, tectonic plates, that's what's going on. All right, fine. Okay, but if they are correct, if their theory is correct, there's another question they're not answering. They're not even dealing with. At least the necromancer was, why? Why is Hashem bringing that earthquake in that place at this time? Right? And what's the meaning behind it? Right. Because the geology, you got the nice plates, but it's just all random, and the plates just randomly bump together at times, and you get earthquakes. But then we have earthquakes in places where they're not bumping, so we got to describe, why is that happening? So it's a theory, but it's their theory. Have they truly seen the tectonic plates? No, they've never been close to that deep in the earth. So they haven't even seen the tectonic plates, but it's the theory. How do they know where the tectonic plates are? Okay, so maybe for like the sound imaging, but here's another question. Really, how much sound imaging have you really done all over the world? I'm sure they've done it in a couple of locations, but do they really know? We don't know if they really know, but it's their theory. And this is a different theory. And the Gemara thinks, for some reason, there's some emes to this theory. We'll have to see why. Rav Katina didn't seem like he liked it. Logically, he was just insulting the logic of it. But the Gemara is going to say, wait, there may be some credence here. Let's look deeper into what an earthquake is. All right, so I want to erase this, if that's okay, and then we'll go to our next step. Yeah.
Amazing stuff.
But it's like, right, so earthquakes is like a lot, here I'll make a bad pun. It's a lot deeper than we thought. It's like,
We're going to call that. And you also you talk about sound wave analysis.
right.
And they say, well, next Tuesday at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
San Francisco's going to have an earthquake, and then 3 months later we're going to have an earthquake.
Now here's another tricky thing. I think they are trying to figure out some kind of early warning system, but earthquakes are very tricky because unlike a hurricane where the meteorologist can see the storm building,
See it.
there's a warning. When we get to hurricanes,
Right.
there's a warning for a hurricane. People can get out of the area.
Well, you see it in
Earthquakes,
Cuba.
yeah,
You see it moving up from
right,
Cuba.
we see it developing, and we have warning, and people can leave. Earthquakes are very tricky. Even with all the research, they have very little warning. I mean, I think it's within a very short period of time where they can send out the warning. So an earthquake, this is something that just comes upon us. And we're going to see that there's big significance of earthquakes, really big significance, major world changes in some cases. Okay, so let's go on, and let's see why the Gemara is not completely throwing out here, let me just make sure it's still going. Not completely throwing out the theory of the necromancer. It seems silly. Rav Katina, initially it was throwing away, but then the Gemara is saying no, he didn't want to publicize that it was coming from the necromancer. So Rav Katina, he's actually going to bring a pasuk here, and I have to look up where the pasuk came from. But he's going to bring a pasuk from the Torah. So he's going to say this. He's going to say that God claps his hands. Hashem claps hands. Now, obviously, an infinite being doesn't have hands. So this is speaking, on a metaphoric level here, and speaking of deeper spiritual realities here. But he says the pasuk. He's going to quote the pasuk, and I'll look it up exactly what he says. I too will pound my hand upon my hand. Okay. And I will put my anger, right, to rest. I said, now this is a very different idea that Rav Katina is bringing up, because what the necromancer was saying is Hashem is sad. Hashem is sad over the exile, the gullus of the Jewish people, and in the sadness, like there's tears, 2 tears from Hashem coming into the ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, and that's causing the earthquake. And there's some kind of sound that's coming out from it, and that's causing the earthquake. But, so let me see, this pasuk, now he's going to bring a pasuk, and this is from, I forgot to write this down. This is from Ezekiel, it's from Yechezkel 21:22. Okay, so this is coming from Yechezkel. Okay. So this is Ezekiel 21:22. And remember, this is talking about the spiritual cause, right? The scientists are just dealing, they want to know physically in the world, physically what's happening. So they're saying physically the mechanism could be these tectonic plates. Now look, it could be when Hashem's saying, I will pound my one hand upon my hand. I mean, we could look at it physically and we could say, okay, if they're right, Hashem's taking one tectonic plate and he's banging against the other tectonic plate. I don't think that's exactly what it means. I think it's stretching it. Now, what's a hand of Hashem? So, I don't want to get too deep into the Kabbalah and the Sod, but these things are all, these Pesukim, these verses, they're alluding to deeper spiritual meanings. And in a sense, in the 10 Spheros, the right hand is related to the Sephira of Chesed, of kindness. And then the left hand is related to the Sephira of Gevura, which is Din, judgment, justice, strength and self-control. So in a sense, this could be referred to as Hashem's taking one hand, and Hashem's taking his compassion and his love, but he's also taking the need for justice if people aren't doing good in the world. He's banging those two together. So he's taking the Sphirot of Chesed and love, and he's banging it together with the Gevura and judgment, and then that's causing an earthquake in the world. So sometimes they're alluding to deeper spiritual meanings like that, and it's not, obviously it's not literal. Hashem doesn't have hands, an infinite being. He's created hands, but the hand of Hashem is a deeper spiritual meaning. So Rav Katina, he brings this pasuk. Now then we're going to see another opinion from Rabbi Nassan here. Let me see if there's any commentary on this from Yechezkel. So it says here, it just gives us the quote. So Rav Katina has suggested this phenomenon leads to an earthquake. Rashi says, the two tears mentioned by the necromancer allude to two reasons for the tears: the physical oppression suffered by the Jews in exile and their spiritual persecution. So Rav Katina, he objects to the depiction of these two elements as two tears, since according to the logic of the mashal, the parable, they should result in two earthquakes. So Rav Katina therefore prefers to describe Hashem's reaction to these two components of suffering as two hands clapping. And what do two hands produce? When two hands come together, they produce one clap, and so they only produce one earthquake. So the metaphor is good in another sense. Allegorically, the heavens are said to have been created with Hashem's right hand, kindness, like we said, chesed, kindness and love, and the earth with his left hand, which is through din, judgment. So the right hand may properly represent Hashem's sadness over his nation's spiritual troubles, and the left hand, his sadness over their material plight. When these two hands are clapped together in frustration, as it were, the resulting sound shakes the world. Right, so this is from the Iye Hayam, cited in the Anach Yosef. So there's deep spiritual concepts of like the right hand of Hashem, the chesed, that the chesed, the kindness, the love, and he's clapping that together with the judgment, the gevura, and then to what Rav Katina's point is, it's not two separate things. So the necromancer is saying, Hashem is upset, sad over the plight and the he's sad over the treatment of the Jews in the exile. And what Rav Katina is saying, no, when you take the one hand and the other hand, when you take the love and kindness for the Jewish people and you take like the anger, the treatment from the other nations, what it does is this. It creates two hands come together, it creates one clap. So two hands create one clap, so it's one earthquake. Two hands create one earthquake. So that's the main point that he's trying to make there.
We're talking, this is it. The subtlety over here, that it says, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers his children who endure in misery amongst the nations of the world. This is Galut, right? This Galus.
Yeah.
So this whole thing is tied somehow to the fact that they were in Galut.
Yeah.
In Galus.
Yeah.
And then that he cried to the sea and earthquakes and this whole thing I think is tied into Galus.
Right. Yeah.
It says, as the Nassan said, Hashem emits a sigh, and says, and I will put my wrath to the rest through the constellation. And I put my wrath bag? You took your bags out.
I'll go get it.
You have your bags out.
I'll get it.
You left it outside. You want to bring it in?
And then, when I'm finished, I didn't realize I have another. I don't need some of that
Yeah,
stuff.
you bring your bags back here. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to see here that Rebbe Nassim, he's going to bring a different idea. He said, let me see what pasuk this is coming from.
Can you bring it down to earth?
I'm
The
trying.
It said God sighed and it said, and I'll bring my wrath to rest.
Yeah. Let me see. Let's see what we can do here. Let's see if we can get it down to the crust of the earth, so to speak. Let's see. So this is from. This is 19. So this is from Yirmiyah. This is from Jeremiah. Yirmiyah. So it's from Yirmiyah. I just lost it. Yirmiyah. 25:30. Okay. So what is he saying here? Okay. So this is a deep concept. So. Once again, Hashem's like upset for us being in exile, and he sighs. Like Hashem, he's like, oh. And the pasuk Rebbe Nassim brings says, I will put my wrath, I will put my anger to rest, v'hani chosi, through them, and so I will find consolation. So here, because of how we're being treated by the other nations, Hashem's bringing on the earthquake to kind of like ease Hashem's anger to Yaakov. Like it's saying, like he sighs, as it's similar to a man who's like really filled with anger, full of fury, and he eases his mind by releasing a sigh. Like someone's really upset. It's like, oh.
Right.
You know, it's like we're just overwhelmed with all this stuff. So the sigh provides a slight comfort. So that's what Rashi's saying. So here too, the pasuk is like to show like an instant of Hashem's sign, not to demonstrate that Hashem's sighs cause earthquakes. So that's Rashi's opinion. Like, so this is just bringing proof that, like, you know, like in Hashem's anger, like sometimes to relieve his anger, he'll sigh, and that's kind of the theory of like why he's bringing the earthquake. Like Hashem's upset and how the Jewish people are being persecuted in the exile. So it's like Hashem's like a pound, you know, I pound my hands together. So the kind of, we're bringing a proof that like Hashem does these things.
Why not just move them to Israel?
Right. So right, we can solve the problem. But here's the tricky part. There's a purpose that we have to be in Golos. Because we need to be in Golos because Ramban says what's really Geula? What's like when Hashem took us out of Egypt? What is it? So the very beginning of the process is, yeah, we have another nation that's ruling over us. We're not in our own. We're not home. We're not in Israel. We have another nation that's ruling the world, right? We can't do like what we fully want to do there. So there's the first step of like kind of taking us out from there, physically taking us out of that country, removing the restriction to not let us fully connect with Hashem. Then the next step, we have to pass through like the Red Sea. You know, we come to Mount Sinai. We come, you know, holiday Shavuos. We have to receive the Torah. For us to become close to Hashem, you know, we need the Torah. We need the Torah, we need the mitzvahs. This brings us closer to Hashem. Then, the final step is then to build, like first we would build the Mishkan, or really build the Beis HaMikdash, to build the temple, where now the Shekinah of Hashem has a home. And now, through the Torah, through the mitzvahs, through living in Eretz Yisrael with a Beis HaMikdash, with a temple in Jerusalem, now we can truly be close and live with Hashem. But there's even a higher level, like the Avos have, that like Hashem, like the Shekinah will rest on all of us. Like Hashem's Shekinah will be spread out among the whole Jewish people, and we'll be even closer. But here's the one tricky part: we gotta want it. We have to want that to live that kind of life.
So we messed up in the middle. And then we got kicked out of Israel. We got all over the place.
Right, we're all over the place.
But we gotta want it now.
We gotta want it. We gotta all want it. And unfortunately, like we're all, like a lot of us are wandering around. We're totally lost in this Golos. We think the Golos is our home. You know, we think the exiles are our home, and we gotta want it back. But also not just this imperfect, just living there and living a secular life. That's not living. That's not connecting to Hashem. That's not the purpose of living there. The purpose of the land. It's a land of special kedusha, special holiness in the land. And special mitzvahs we can do only in the land. And then the place where Hashem chose out of the whole world to build the base of Mikdash there in Jerusalem, there on the Har HaBayis, there in the Temple Mount, Zion. The real Zion is the Temple Mount, the temple. But when we want to live with Hashem, and then we're the Or LaGoyim, then we're the light to the nations. When all the world sees that we have a special, close relationship with Hashem, then they're going to want that special, close relationship with
call it the
Hashem.
80,
And then they're going to want to follow the Torah. They're going to want to, have that
The
relationship.
80-20 theory. 80% will never want to be Kedusha.
I don't know. We'll see.
It's amazing.
We'll see. Okay, so that's Rabbi Nassan. So Rabbi Nassan is like, in one sense, he's bringing proof that like Hashem does these things. Now Hashem doesn't really have emotion. He's an infinite being, but he's speaking in our language. Like we can understand. We have emotions. We have the midos. We have emotions.
Let's go again. It says, Hashem sighs, and it says, and I will put my wrath to rest.
Yeah.
To them, to the Jewish people, I guess.
Well, no, I think Hashem's angry at how the other nations are persecuting the Jewish people.
Other nations.
So so Hashem can do two things. He can just kind of like sigh. So this is not talking about earthquakes, but this is the concept that Hashem does these because he's angry. So sometimes instead of like doing something, Hashem's angry, but he'll just go, oh, and a person's just like exasperated. But here, what Rav Katina is saying is, Hashem's angry at how the Jewish people are being treated. So he's angry and sad at the Golas, and he's angry at how we're being persecuted by other nations, and Hashem will go like this, he'll go like, right. So his love for us on the right hand, his anger at the other nations, and when he brings in, Rav Katina is saying, when he brings that together, right, that causes the earthquake. So it's both the compassion and the anger at how everyone else is treating us, and that causes the earthquake. Yeah. Everything's shaking today. We're at the whole.
So we take through them means that the other nations.
Yeah, I don't fully understand why the Gemara brings Rabbi Nassan. I don't know what it adds to this. I'm not fully grasping what it adds, but it's showing at least that the concept of Hashem sometimes like he's angry but he won't act. Even when Hashem doesn't act. And instead of acting, Hashem will just kind of go,
right,
oh,
right.
It's like, okay, it's like, but it's kiviyaka. Okay, so the rabbis say, the Rabbanan say, Hashem kicks. This is an interesting concept. He kicks the sky. He kicks the sky, and they're going to bring a pasuk as proof of this. And it says, right. So the pasuk says, I'm going to bring the quote. It says. He shouts, I think he shouts, hey dad. I think I wrote it wrong. I think the autocorrect got me again on this. I think he shouts, hey dad. I'll double check that. Like, here, we'll be grammatically correct here. We'll only have the single quote in the quote. When we do the quote in the quote, we only have one. Okay, I think he shouts, hey dad. I want to see what that means. Like those who trample the grapes at the winepress. And we'll see where this comes from, and we'll see what this means. And this is to, I think this is to all the inhabitants of the land, to all, I don't know if that's the quote, but I think maybe the full quote, to all the inhabitants of the land. Yeah. Okay, to the land. And this may be the rest of the quote. Let me see where that quote comes from. Okay, so and let's see, this quote, they're taking it from, where's that coming from? So it's hey dad, he shouts hey dad, and that's 21. And this is from, I think Isaiah. This is from Yeshaya. It's from Yeshaya 66:1. And let's see what this means here. So, when he pushes his feet beneath the throne of glory, the kisei kavod, so to speak, kiviyachol, the tremor reaches the earth, which is his footstool. So that's what Rashi's saying. So this series of anthropomorphisms occasions a lengthy discussion by some of the early commentators. So Rav Chai Gon, he cited in Ozar HaGeonim, Rav Nisan Gon, cited in the HaKosev. So they say the same explanation of the pasuk, the verse, almost exactly. They say the fundamental principle is that Hashem is incorporeal, he's like an infinite being, and that no description of a human mood or action can be true of him in a literal sense. So he doesn't, like Hashem doesn't really laugh, he doesn't like lament, he doesn't mourn, he doesn't sigh, he doesn't have really tears. So when the Chachamim, when the sages speak of Hashem in these terms or similar terms, they should be understood without exception in an allegorical sense. When the rabbis say in Yerushalmi, in Peah 2:4, they say, we may not rely upon agadic statements. It was in reference to the pasuk, the verses, such as ours. We may not arrive at conclusions based on their literal meaning. In using these metaphorical devices, the Chachamim, they followed in the footsteps of the Torah, which contain a great number of metaphors, like the eye of God, the hand of God, the anger of God. In all these cases, the Torah is using down-to-earth descriptions to convey a sense of what is transpiring above. Clearly, they cannot be understood in their literal sense, and all Agadah, they contain details of this nature to be understood in the same way. So turning to our specific pasuk, Rav Katina mentioned that the Jewish nation is precious before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, so much so that whatever transpires in the world is ultimately on account of the Jewish people. Accordingly, the natural events of the heavens and earth relate to matters between Hashem and His chosen people. For example, a rainbow seen amongst a cloud is a sign of the bris, of the covenant established after the flood of all mankind. So Rav Katina maintains that an earthquake is also this kind of sign. In this case, a sign of Hashem's compassion for His people, who are bereft of their temples, scattered among the nations, and living amidst misery. Hashem therefore creates an earthquake which manifests His anguish over their plight. So Rav Hai Gon and Rav Nisim Gon, they allow that Hashem may precipitate an earthquake by creating the likeness of hands clapping or a kick. In any case, it must be stated categorically that these phenomena do not involve a literal eye, a throat, a hand, or foot of God. Chas v'shalom. So the Rabbeinu Hananel, he says, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu observes the bitter persecution of the Jews at the hands of the nations, he is moved to bring a flood of destruction against the persecutors. However, he remembers the covenant, he remembers the bris he made with Noah, to never again bring a flood upon the whole earth, and he's compelled to refrain. So the equivalent of tears are released. In his frustration, so to speak, kiviyachol, an earthquake is produced. The earthquake's entire purpose is to demonstrate to the Jews that Hashem has not abandoned them, deserted them, or forgotten them, but He will one day restore them to the land and their former glory. Therefore, they should not despair of the redemption of the Gula, and should rather bear the yoke of tribulation patiently until the duration of the exile expires. When the Jews witness Hashem's display of His anguish at their situation, they say, "Behold, God is with us. His mercies are upon us, and our remembrance is before Him." They are thereby strengthened in their yiras Hashem, their fear of Hashem, and rededicate themselves to His Torah. So when we say an earthquake is caused by Hashem's response to the Jews in exile, that is not to say that earthquakes did not exist prior to the destruction of the temple. Similarly, when we say the thunder's purpose is to put yira into the crookedness of the heart, or that a rainbow is a sign of Hashem's restraint in wreaking havoc upon the world, that does not mean that those natural phenomena have not existed since the 6 days of creation. Rather, these are all naturally occurring events dependent on the confluence of certain environmental conditions, according to the Rambam. However, if a generation of Jews is sufficiently righteous, Hashem will spare them from the soul-shattering blast of nature's malevolence. And if a particular saintly individual, tzaddik, has enough merit to protect his generation from destruction, such as Rebbe Yeshua ben Levi, then a rainbow will not be seen in his days, brought by the Rashba on the Agadah. Right, so it's an incredible thing. Okay, so Hashem's created all these phenomena into the natural world, into the Teva. The earth, Hashem's created all these phenomena. He's created things like the earthquakes, the hurricanes, the tornadoes, lightning, thunder. But he's bringing them at times and bringing them in certain places to send a message. So one thing that Chazal is really stressing is that an earthquake is like, it's arousing Hashem's compassion for us and his anger at how we're being persecuted among the nations. So in some ways, an earthquake's coming when he's telling the other nations, you better back off. And if you notice when if you notice Iran, they've had significant amount of earthquakes in the last decade or so. But the nations that are really agitating against the Jewish people, they really can get the wake-up call. And then, so not so coincident. So how was there an earthquake in Washington, D.C., that wasn't on a fault line in the tectonic plates? Well, unfortunately, during those years in the Obama administration, he was at times being very antagonistic to Israel. And we see, there's a sign of Hashem's displeasure of how, the nations, and the epicenter, was exactly, in Washington, D.C. All right, let's go on to the last thing, then we'll take a little break, and then we'll go into the Yerushalmi.
But Hashem doesn't go all the way to tell Washington, D.C., I'm going to split you guys so that you'll all go into the pit.
So I give you a little spoiler alert. That in the Yerushalmi, there could be earthquakes, and we'll talk. Give me one. Let me just put this up real quick. So we talked about this, but I didn't write it up on the board. But this is the example of Hashem kicking his throne of glory, and this is referring to his aspect of judgment, of judging the whole world. So he said that this is when the earthquake is when Hashem he pushes his feet under the throne of glory. He pushes his feet. So when Hashem's doing judgment on the world, he pushes his feet under the kisei kavod, under the throne of glory, right? And then he's going to bring a pasuk to prove this. Throne of glory. And then the pasuk is that Hashem saying, the heavens are my throne. The heavens are my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Right? And the earth is my footstool, and this is relating exactly the same concept once again, that Hashem is angry with the world of how they're treating us, and that the earthquake is a sign of his displeasure. Right, let me just look up real quick where this guy. I should have put where it's from. This is Rav Acha, and this is from 23. Yeah, 23. So this is, where's the quote from? I don't know. I don't have the quote, but this is the quote, and we'll take a break right now, and then we're going to see something really incredible.
Bracha is from where? Yeshaya or Yerushalmi?
And let me see if I can get it straight now. Right, so we'll just clear this up real quick. So I think the first two pasukim are from Yechezkel 21:22. The next down here, the rabbis are quoting is from Yirmiyah, and then the final quote from Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, that's from Yeshaya. Okay, so that's just clearing up the quotes. Okay, so. I don't know if we'll write as much, we'll see. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at a different view. And this is going to be the Talmud Yerushalmi. So this is the Jerusalem Talmud, and it's in Brachos 88b. And now we're going to see a whole different view of why earthquakes are coming. So really, in the Bavli, really Hashem's bringing an earthquake because he feels bad for the Jewish people that we're still in Gullus, we're still in exile. He's mad at how the other nations are persecuting us. So it's really coming because their anti-Semitism, their persecution of us. This is now Hashem sending the earthquake, according to Yerushalmi, because we're not doing certain things properly. And Hashem's kind of sending us a warning to kind of jar us to do teshuvah. So it's a very different view. So it starts off, Bar Kapara is going to teach in a Brisa, and he's going to say we should sound shofars. We should blow shofars when there's an earthquake. And it's kind of now we're looking at the earthquake as it's like Hashem's waking us up to do teshuvah. That there's something that we're not doing correct, and we gotta get our act together. So here's going to be something very interesting. So instead of Rav Katina walking in front of the house of the necromancer, and asking him why he thinks there's earthquakes, we're going to see a very different conversation here. Now we're going to see Eliyahu Hanavi himself. We're going to see Elijah the prophet, Zachor Latov, may he be remembered for the good, and he's going to now ask Rabbi Nehurai, right? And he's going to ask, so we have Eliyahu now coming, and he's asking Rabbi Nehurai what causes the earthquake. So he's going to say, why do you think, what cause does, earthquakes come into the world? Now this is really fascinating. One thing that's fascinating is, so we had a very different conversation. It's very interesting. So right, so the Bavli, which was written in the Gullus, which is written in the exile, is focusing on the Jewish people and their treatment by the other nations in the Gullus, in the exile. Now here, the Talmud Yerushalmi is written in Eretz Yisrael, and it's going to focus more of the activities that are being done in the land of Israel. So what's so interesting about this is, you see, when we're in exile, right? When we're living among the other nations, what do we do? What do we do? So Rav Katina is walking in front of the house of a sorcerer, a necromancer, and there's an earthquake, and he's going to ask that guy why. That's life in exile. Here, this is so incredible. The change in perspective is so incredible. Here, when we're living in Eretz Yisrael, then Eliyahu Hanavi himself, he comes to Rabbi Nehurai. Like, he's going to ask God. Now, you would think Eliyahu Hanavi was such a close, communication with Hashem that he would know the answer, but I think he's beginning a conversation. I think he's going to give us some insight also. But now we have the opposite. When we're living the elevated life in Eretz Yisrael, then we have Eliyahu Hanavi come to the Rebbeim there and ask them. Instead of Rav Katina having to go to the necromancer and asking him a reason. Okay, so now he says what? So here's his answer. So Rabbi Nehurai, his answer is this. He's saying we do not do this mitzvah as well as we should. And so he says it's the sin of not properly separating truma and maasros, right? Of separating, right, truma and maaser, right? The maaseros. So this is really fascinating. Now, if you think about it, it makes sense. It's like a very meta reaction. All the produce is growing. We're growing our crops. We're growing it right from the land. We're growing the crops right from the land, but we're not doing the mitzvah properly of separating out the truma that goes to the kohanim and the maaser that goes to the leviim, and then also the maaser ani that goes to the poor people that need it, that need the food. So we're not using the earth properly, and then Hashem sending an earthquake as kind of like a sign. You're not using the earth the way I commanded you to do it. You're not doing the mitzvahs of the earth the way I commanded, so now I'm going to make the earth shake. So there's a pasuk. There's a couple of psukim we have here. So we have the eyes of Hashem. So it's going to talk about the special relationship, or how precious what happens in the land of Israel is to Hashem. So the eyes of Hashem, right? The eyes of Hashem, your God, are always on it, are always on the land of Israel. Everything that happens in the land of Israel is precious to Hashem. And we see this in Devarim, Deuteronomy 11:12, right? So we see it in Devarim 11:12. But so we see what's really interesting. So it's not even just Hashem. We see how all the nations of the world react now to Israel. A settler, they build a couple new houses, in Judea, in Samaria, and the world goes crazy. Like, how dare you? How dare a Jew build this house over here, And the whole world goes nuts. So the whole world's attention is also constantly on the land of Israel. But it's saying especially to Hashem, like one of his main concerns in the world is what's happening in the land of Israel. So it's like the eyes of Hashem. And once again, right, this metaphoric, it's not just about vision, like Hashem's just watching the activities of mankind. And then it says in Tehillim, it says, the one who gazes upon the land and it trembles, right? And it trembles. So meaning like an earthquake. Who touches the mountains? And they erupt in smoke. And that sounds like it's talking about a volcano, right? And they erupt in smoke. So then volcanoes. So earthquakes and volcanoes. Okay, so this is, where is this from? This is from Tehillim. Let's say, so Tehillim 104. From Psalms 104, 32. Okay. All right, so what does this mean? So let's see. So how do we reconcile these two Pesukim? So in one, the first pasuk from Devarim, from Deuteronomy, it says that the eyes of Hashem, your God, are always on it, are always on the land of Israel. And then it's saying the one who gazes upon the land and it trembles, who touches the mountains and they erupt in smoke. So it seems like it's different. It seems like it's a big contradiction there. Like on one hand, like Hashem, like the land's precious and everything that happens in the land is very precious. And now all of a sudden now we have we have earthquakes and volcanoes. All right, so let's see what it says here. So it says one who gazes upon the land and trembles. Let's see. So where is the first one? The eyes of Hashem, your God, are always upon it from the beginning of the year until year's end, and the land is not harmed in any way. So it's when we obey the laws of Truma and Meiser properly, we merit the good gaze of Hashem. Like Hashem's happy, and then the land's protected. So I'm sorry I didn't write out the rest of this, but the rest of the first one is that not only is Hashem's eyes always on it, they're on it from the beginning of the year until the year's end. And then nothing is harmed in the land. So nothing's harmed in the land because Hashem, when we're doing the mitzvahs properly, nothing can touch us. Then the land's completely protected by Hashem. But if we're not separating Meiser, and we're not separating the Truma, then now we can get earthquakes, and now we can even get volcanoes. Right? So Hashem looks, when he sees, when the king sees that the subjects are doing what they're supposed to do in the kingdom, then the king's happy, and they get great protection. And then Chas v'Shalom, if we're not, then then we're a little bit of trouble. Okay, so this one is interesting. So, right, so when we're doing the will of Hamakom, we separate it. Then the eyes of Hashem are always on it from the beginning of the year until the year's end, and the land is not harmed in any way. But when Israel does not do the will of Hamakom, then they do not separate their Meiseros as required. Then the one who gazes upon the land and trembles will get the earthquakes. So now Eliyahu says back to Rabbi Nahorai, he says, my son, he says, Bani, by your life, this is the reasoning behind the matter. However, this is the essence of the matter. Rather, Akash Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He gazes upon the amphitheaters and the feasting places, which rest secure, undisturbed, and peaceful, while His holy temple was destroyed, and He desires to bring down His world and destroy it. All right, this one's a little scary. All right, so this is Eliyahu's answer. Right, this is Eliyahu's reasoning for the earthquakes. So this is Eliyahu's answer, and this is a little tricky. All right. So Eliyahu Hanavi, he answers back. So he says this. He says Hashem sees. So the Kadosh Baruch Hu, he sees the amphitheaters and the feasting places, right? And we'll explain what this means. Again, amphitheaters and feasting places. And they rest secure and undisturbed while his holy temple is destroyed. Alright, so this is a really scary idea. So what it's saying is, like we're very sensitive to this when we're in the 3 weeks, when we're in the 17th of Tammuz, when we're heading to the 9 days, we're thinking a lot, that we don't have the Beis HaMikdash, and that it's destroyed, and that we want to do what it's going to take to rebuild it. But unfortunately, maybe we kind of lose sight. We lose sight of this idea during the rest of the year, and right, it's very scary that if you think about what the people of the world they do, we just had the Olympics, right? It should the world there shouldn't be a year that would pass that the world wouldn't say we need to have Hashem's house, His Beis HaMikdash, His temple back in the world. We have a world. In a sense, Chas v'Shalom, almost without God, right? We have a world where we don't have the physical presence. The Shekinah of Hashem is resting on the Arna Kodesh and the Holy of the Holies in Jerusalem, where the whole world can come and see Hashem's house, and that the world does have a creator, and the world has a sustainer, and the world has a great king that's running the world. And when we don't have that, right? We don't have that. We're not as connected to Hashem. And then what Hashem sees is he sees there's sort of this huge Olympics, these crazy rituals in Paris, and the world's going to huge sporting events, and they're cheering, in all the stadiums, and they're going to the big music concerts, and then people are having these huge feasts, like the gourmet, the feasting and the partying, and these huge parties all over the world, so it's like Hashem's anger. So once again, now we get to Hashem's anger, and it's if we're not utilizing the land properly, we get the Meiser. We're not doing the mitzvah of Meiser and Truma, in the land, and that can cause an earthquake. And then when Hashem sees the world partying and celebrating, and having these big concerts and sporting events, and all these celebrations while the temple's destroyed, and so this once again is the aspect of Hashem's anger. And the earth itself is not as it should be, and Hashem's shaking the earth. The thing about to wake someone up, sometimes you wake your kids up, you start very softly, get up, it's time for school. When you come back, a few minutes later, okay, a little louder, okay, we got to go to school. And if you have to come back 4, 5, 6 times, by the 6th time, if your kids aren't up that day to go to school, you may start shaking the bed. It's all right, that's it, time's up, get up. You start shaking the bed, go to school, get up, let's go. We gotta get the day going. So it can start very softly, but if we're not getting the message, and the world just got these huge celebrations, that can cause an earthquake. Okay, so that's one of the reasons Eliyahu says back to Rabbi Nehorai. And then it says, Hashem cries over his lodging place, his Nevehu. And it's over his lodging place. Okay, so Rabbi Acha, why is there so many earthquakes in San Francisco? And it could be this reason.
You think there's a relationship?
According to Rabbi Acha, he says it's the Aveira of Zachar, what's it called?
Okay.
Lishkav Zachar, unfortunately, men having relations that they're not supposed to be having with each other. So the Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, says, you caused your limbs to tremble for that which is not yours. You're trembling, and this is not your wife, this is not who was given to you. So by your life I will cause my world to tremble. So it's for that Avera. So it's the trembling not done in Kedushin, not done to bring children in the world, not to bring pleasure to one's wife, but just for their own gratification, and it only brings death into the world. And that, according to Rabbi Acha, that causes the earthquake. So it's Hashem's anger over that Avera. But the rabbis say, this is very interesting, the rabbis say it's because of machlokas. It's because of people fighting. Right? The rabbis say, because of machlokas, of fighting, of discord, of all the people arguing with each other over everything. Right? And this is just the fighting. Non-stop fighting of people not getting along with each other. And this is not the way the world's supposed to be. So he brings a pasuk here, the rabbis bring a pasuk, and they say, and you will flee to the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains will reach to Atzal, and you will flee as you fled from the earthquake that was in the days of Uzziah Melech Yehuda, the king of Yehuda. So this is from Divrei Hayamim 2:26 and Pasukim verses 16 and 19. And Rabbi Shmuel says an earthquake is a very interesting idea. So Rabbi Shmuel brings a very interesting idea. And this could be, when we'll talk about the Zohar that we learned about yesterday. So Rabbi Shmuel has this idea. Let me write it up here. Here, I'll write it in red just to emphasize it. That it's an announcement. It's a big announcement. So Rabbi Shmuel, he says, Hashem brings the earthquake to say that this is going to be the end of the kingdom. When Hashem wants to announce the end of the kingdom, an earthquake is brought. So Rabbi Shmuel says earthquake, it basically signals the end of a kingdom. So it says in Yirmiyahu 51:29, it says the land quaked and shuddered. So this is a very interesting idea. So when we go back to the Zohar on Parsha Balak, so I don't know, we don't know. We're talking about, is it going to be this year? Is it a different year? We don't know. But there's going to be some star, a nova star put into the sky, the Zohar says, on the 25th of Elul, on the 6th day, so it'll be Erev Shabbos. And it's going to announce something. And then it says, it sounds like there could be like an earthquake in Rome. It says, however, it's going to come about. There's going to be 3 walls that come down in Rome, and the leader of the city in Rome is going to be killed. He's going to die. So there could be an earthquake bringing that. I don't know. We don't know the mechanism. But it could be an announcement that the kingdom of Edom, its days are done. You know, the empire of Edom. But for sure, it says in the Zohar very clearly, it says 70 days later, when the nova star disappears from the world, it says there's going to be an earthquake on the Har HaBayis itself, on the Temple Mount. And it's going to go for 40 mil. It says it's in the Zohar that we learned yesterday. And it says, if the epicenter of the earthquake is right on the Temple Mount, it seems like it would knock down the Dome of the Rock and the Al Askamas, but it's a sign that the empire of Yishmael, that they will no longer have rule over the Temple Mount, and that their empire. So Rabbi Shmuel is a very interesting idea, that when a major earthquake is brought into a country, it can be announcing that the kingdom is going to change. Like the kingdom will be no more, and the earthquake itself is an announcement that the kingdom's over. So for what reason? How do we know this? How do we know this idea? What's Jeremiah saying? What's Jeremiah saying? The land quaked and it shuddered. So for what reason is this pasuk being brought? It says, another pasuk says, for the thoughts of Hashem rose against Babylon, to lay the land of Babylon waste without inhabitant. So we see that the end of the kingdom of Babylon was first an earthquake. It was announced through an earthquake, for earthquakes. And then with regard to the earthquake that came in the time of King Uzziah, it says it was not a divine response to Machlokas, but it marked the end of Uzziah's reign. It marked the end of his rule, of a king's rule. So now we see a very interesting idea that one aspect of an earthquake is that it announces the end of kingship, and of an empire, of a ruler, and it's an announcement that it's like, because you shake the earth. It's like, it's shaking up the country, it's shaking up the world. There's going to be we call it a shake-up. It's a big shake-up, a political shake-up. But Hashem's shaking the earth to say there's going to be a change. I'm shaking the earth, I'm moving the earth away from its normal, peaceful state, and I'm shaking things up, and there's going to be a change in leadership, a change in
So
leadership.
think